The shadow of Aurelia 9 stretched long and desolate across the barren surface. Cyrus Loren stood at the viewport of the abandoned observation station, eyes scanning the horizon where dust storms perpetually raged against the bruised purple sky. 5 years he had been here, self-exiled to this forgotten moon, where the only company was the occasional indigenous scurrier creature and the persistent whisper of regret that followed him like a ghost. He ran his fingers through his unkempt hair, a nervous habit that had intensified during his solitude. The station's aging systems hummed around him, a technical symphony he had learned to maintain through necessity rather than passion. Once, he had been Omnicorp's rising star in biological engineering, celebrated for innovations that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Now, he was nothing more than a hermit, hiding from a past that had cost too many lives. The memory of the Neros 7 incident still burned fresh. The faces of the colonists twisted in agony as the terraforming bacteria mutated beyond control, the ecological collapse that followed, and worst of all, Eliza's eyes as she realized what was happening, moments before the containment doors sealed forever. His sister had trusted him, believed in the safeguards he'd assured her existed. But he had overlooked the warnings, dismissed the anomalous readings, trusted the corporation's assurances that deadlines mattered more than redundant testing. He'd obeyed orders. People had died. It was as simple and as devastating as that. Cyrus turned from the viewport, forcing himself back to his daily routine. The hydroponic garden needed tending, soil samples required analysis, and the station's eastern bulkhead had developed another leak during the last pressure fluctuation. The mundane tasks kept his hands busy and his mind, if not at peace, at least distracted. The long-range scanner chirped unexpectedly, drawing his attention. It was an old model, salvaged from the station's original equipment, repurposed to monitor local conditions rather than deep space. Yet there it was, a faint, flickering biosignature, appearing and disappearing at the edge of its range. Cyrus frowned, adjusting the settings. The signal was weak but unmistakable, life signs, but with patterns he'd never encountered before. Not the simple signatures of Aurelia's sparse indigenous life, but something complex, organized, something intelligent, and failing. The coordinates placed the signal in the Obsidian Valley, a treacherous area of jagged rock formations and unstable ground, littered with technological debris from abandoned mining operations. It was a 3-hour journey on foot in the best conditions, and conditions on Aurelia 9 were never good. His first instinct was to ignore it. He had come here to disappear, to harm no one and help no one. Involvement meant risk, risk of discovery, risk of failure, risk of more guilt to add to the mountain he already carried. But as he watched the life sign fade, strengthen momentarily, then fade again, Cyrus felt the weight of Eliza's final expression. The helplessness he'd felt watching her die, separated by unbreakable glass. He had failed her. He had failed everyone. Not this time, he whispered to the empty room. Cyrus hastily gathered supplies. A battered environment suit with patches on its patches, a handheld scanner that worked about half the time, basic medical supplies designed for human physiology, and emergency rations. The airlock cycle seemed to take forever, the ancient machinery groaning as it adjusted pressures and filtered out the corrosive elements that made Aurelia's atmosphere lethal to human lungs. Outside, the wind immediately buffeted him, fine particles of dust already seeking entry through the suit's worn seams. Visibility extended barely 50 meters in the amber haze, and the terrain was treacherous. Loose scree gave way underfoot, hidden sinkholes threatened to swallow the unwary, and sharp, crystalline formations rose like teeth from the ground. Guided by his scanner, Cyrus pressed forward, each step calculated, each breath measured. The journey took nearly 4 hours, twice stopping to shelter as microstorms intensified around him. When he finally crested the ridge overlooking the signal's source, his heart sank. Below, half buried in sand and rock, lay a small escape pod. Its hull was charred black, with clear evidence of explosive damage along one side. The entry hatch had been forced open from within, its edges bent outward as though someone had expended their last strength to break free. Cyrus scrambled down the slope, scanner beeping urgently as the life signs fluctuated dangerously. He approached the pod cautiously. Years of solitude had not erased his scientific caution or corporate paranoia. The craft bore no markings he recognized, its design more organic than mechanical, with flowing lines instead of hard angles. "Hello," he called out, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears after so long without use. "Is anyone there? I can help you." No response came from the pod's dark interior. Cyrus steeled himself and entered, the helmet light of his suit casting long shadows. The pod's single compartment was small, designed for one passenger. The control panels were dark, systems dead. Dried fluid of an unfamiliar blue-purple color streaked the floor, leading to the forced-open hatch. Whatever had been here had dragged itself out. Following the trail, Cyrus discovered a shallow cave formed by a fallen section of metallic debris and natural rock. And there, curled into herself, he found her. The alien woman lay trembling on her side, one arm protectively wrapped around her grotesquely swollen abdomen. Her skin was a silvery blue that seemed to shimmer even in her weakened state, with delicate ridge-like patterns along her hairless scalp and down her neck. Her eyes, when they flickered open at his approach, were enormous and entirely black, with no discernible iris or sclera. But what struck Cyrus most wasn't her alienness, but her condition. She was clearly in the advanced stages of labor, her body racked with contractions. Blood, or what he assumed was blood, that same blue-purple fluid, pooled beneath her. Her breathing came in short, gasping bursts, and her temperature, according to his scanner, was dangerously elevated even for a species he knew nothing about. She recoiled as he approached, a weak, guttural sound escaping her throat. Her free hand scrabbled in the dirt, searching for a weapon, a rock, anything to defend herself. "I won't hurt you," Cyrus said, keeping his voice low and calm, trying to project reassurance through the barrier of his helmet and the greater barrier of species. "You need help. Your child needs help." The woman's black eyes fixed on him, incomprehension mixing with pain and fear. Another contraction seized her, and she curled tighter, her silver-blue skin flushing a deeper indigo around her face and neck. Cyrus looked back toward the horizon, where the distant silhouette of his station was invisible in the dust-hazed atmosphere. He looked down at the dying woman and her unborn child. He thought of Eliza. "I'm going to help you," he said, knowing she couldn't understand his words, but hoping his intent might somehow transcend language. "But we need to get you to shelter. The radiation levels increase at night, and the temperature drops below freezing." Carefully, he approached, monitoring her reactions. She watched him with those alien eyes, her resistance seemingly diminished by pain and necessity. When he gently slid his arms beneath her, she made no move to fight him, only clutched her abdomen tighter and released a sound somewhere between a whimper and a hiss. The journey back was a nightmare. The woman was lighter than he expected, her body seemingly less dense than a human's, but still a burden after years of relative inactivity. Every jolt on the uneven terrain elicited a wince or soft cry that tore at Cyrus's conscience. Twice he had to stop as contractions racked her body, making it impossible to continue. The station's silhouette appeared like a mirage through the dust-filled air just as Aurelia's weak sun began to set. Cyrus's muscles screamed, his lungs burned, and his suit's oxygen reserves flashed critical warnings. The alien woman had fallen unconscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. "Almost there," he gasped, though no one could hear him. "Don't give up, either of you." The airlock cycle seemed interminable, the decontamination process too slow. As soon as the inner door opened, Cyrus staggered through to his makeshift laboratory, once a proper research space, now cluttered with his personal experiments and geological specimens. He cleared the central table with one sweep of his arm, specimens and equipment clattering to the floor. Gently, he laid the woman down, her skin now burning hot against his hands as he removed his gloves. The contractions were coming faster now, her abdomen rippling with them, even in unconsciousness. Cyrus worked frantically, connecting his limited medical equipment, calibrating it as best he could for non-human readings. He cleaned her wounds, lacerations across her shoulders and back, a deep puncture in her thigh, burns along one side of her body. His training had never covered xenobiology, let alone alien obstetrics, but the fundamentals of life support were universal: oxygen, hydration, temperature regulation, pain management. As he worked, the woman's eyes snapped open, and she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her black eyes bored into his, and her mouth moved, forming sounds that his ears interpreted as clicks and soft whistles. "I don't understand," Cyrus said, shaking his head. "I'm trying to help you. Your baby is coming." Her grip tightened as another contraction seized her. This one was different. Her entire body arched, and a keening sound escaped. Cyrus recognized the signs. The final stage had begun. What followed was the most terrifying and miraculous experience of Cyrus's life. Without proper equipment, without knowledge of her physiology, without shared language, he helped her bring her child into the world. The birth was mercifully quick, as though her body, knowing its limitations, expedited the process. The infant slid into his waiting hands, impossibly small and fragile. Its skin was a paler blue than its mother's, almost translucent, with a faint pattern of darker markings that seemed to pulse with its rapid heartbeats. Most striking were its eyes. Unlike its mother's pure black orbs, the child's eyes were a swirling mix of black and amber, with distinct irises and pupils. As Cyrus held the newborn, it opened its tiny mouth and released a sound like chiming crystal, high and clear. The sound seemed to pierce through the woman's exhaustion. She reached for her child with trembling hands, and Cyrus carefully placed the infant on her chest. The connection between them was immediate and transcendent. The woman curled around her child, her fingers tracing its features with unbearable tenderness. She made soft clicking sounds that the baby seemed to respond to, its tiny body calming against hers. Cyrus stepped back, suddenly feeling like an intruder in a sacred moment. He watched as mother and child communed in their alien way, speaking a language of touch and sound that needed no translation. Then the woman's eyes found his again, and in them was something universal: gratitude. She extended one slender, three-fingered hand toward him, palm upward. Hesitantly, Cyrus placed his five-fingered hand against hers. Her skin was cooler now, the fever breaking, and it felt like silk against his calloused palm. "You're welcome," he said softly. The next few days established a fragile routine. The woman, who he had started thinking of simply as mother in his mind, slept much of the time, her body recovering from its ordeal. The child, infant in his mental log, was surprisingly robust, alert and curious from the first hours. Cyrus provided water and what food he thought might be safe, mostly synthesized proteins and simple carbohydrates from his hydroponic garden. Mother accepted these cautiously, testing each offering before consuming it, and never taking her eyes off him as she did so. She fed her child from her own body, the infant latching onto a point near her collarbone where the skin changed color slightly during feeding times. Communication was limited to gestures and expressions. Mother would point to what she needed: water, warmth, privacy, and Cyrus would do his best to provide it. She allowed him to treat her wounds, but tensed at every touch, relaxing only when he stepped away again. The infant was different. It watched Cyrus constantly, those strange amber-black eyes following his movements around the lab. When he approached, it would reach toward him with tiny hands that already showed the beginnings of the same ridge patterns as its mother. On the fourth day, Cyrus decided to return to the escape pod. The storm season was intensifying, and soon the valley would be inaccessible for weeks. If there were any supplies, medicines, or information that could help his guests, he needed to retrieve them now. He explained his intentions to Mother as best he could, miming the pod and his planned journey. She watched him with those unreadable black eyes, then, to his surprise, nodded once, a distinctly human gesture that caught him off guard. The journey was easier without a burden, but the landscape had already changed. New dunes formed where paths had been. The pod was more buried than before, sand and rock already reclaiming it for the moon's barren surface. Inside, Cyrus conducted a more thorough investigation. The pod's systems were completely dead, beyond any repair his limited tools could provide. He salvaged what he could: strange fabrics with unusual thermal properties, containers of gel-like substances that might be medical or nutritional, a small device that pulsed with soft light when he touched it. It was when he examined the navigation console that he found the data crystal, half hidden beneath a damaged panel. The translucent cylinder still glowed faintly with internal light. Cyrus carefully extracted it and connected it to his portable scanner, hoping the universal data protocols might be compatible enough to extract something useful. The scanner's screen filled with corrupted symbols, most unintelligible. But among the static and broken code, one message repeated, rendered in standard corporate encoding, a system Cyrus recognized from his Omnicorp days. Specimen unstable. Offspring carries anomaly. Terminate. Do not retrieve. Cyrus stared at the words, their clinical cruelty stunning him. The message confirmed his worst suspicions. Mother hadn't crashed here by accident. She had been deliberately abandoned, her pod sabotaged, left to die along with her unborn child because of some perceived defect or inconvenience to whoever had held her captive. His hands shaking with anger, Cyrus pocketed the data crystal and continued his search. In a hidden compartment near the pilot seat, he found a small case containing vials of luminescent fluid and what looked like medical instruments designed for the alien physiology. He took these as well, hoping they might prove useful. As he climbed out of the pod, a familiar logo caught his eye, nearly worn away on the hull's exterior, partially covered by scorch marks, but unmistakable to someone who had worked under it for years. The stylized double helix of biogenesis, Omnicorp's biggest competitor in the field of xenobiological research. "What are they doing to you?" he whispered, tracing the logo with one gloved finger. The sky darkened suddenly, and Cyrus looked up to see one of Aurelia's notorious dust storms rolling in from the east. He had perhaps 20 minutes before it hit with full force. Securing his salvage, he began the trek back, pushing his pace to the limit. When he returned to the station, exhausted and dust-covered, he found Mother awake and sitting upright on the makeshift bed he had arranged for her. The infant lay in her arms, making those crystalline sounds that seemed to be its form of communication. Mother looked at him with new wariness as he entered, perhaps sensing his tension and anger. He set down his findings carefully, trying to project calm he didn't feel. That night, after Mother had fallen asleep with her child cradled against her, Cyrus examined the data crystal more thoroughly. Most of the information was corrupted beyond recovery, but fragments painted a disturbing picture. References to breeding program, genetic compatibility, and physiological adaptation appeared multiple times. There were identification codes, sterile designations for living beings. Mother was apparently host subject XB 117, while the infant was classified as hybrid specimen 23. Cyrus's stomach churned at the clinical dehumanization, or de-alienization, he supposed. The corporate language was familiar from his Omnicorp days, the same bloodless terminology that had masked the horror of the Nero 7 disaster. People weren't people to corporations like Biogenesis or Omnicorp. They were resources, test subjects, acceptable losses in the calculus of profit. He shut down the scanner, unable to stomach more. Whatever Biogenesis had been doing, it was clear that Mother had been little more than property to them, and her child a product, one deemed defective and discarded without a second thought. Cyrus looked over at the sleeping forms of Mother and child. In sleep, Mother's face had softened, losing the perpetual wariness she maintained while awake. The infant's skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, its tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "They won't find you," he promised quietly. "I won't let them." The next morning brought a breakthrough. As Cyrus prepared a nutrient solution for Mother, she pointed to herself and made a sound like wind through leaves, Rhea? She repeated it, then pointed more firmly. Rhea, Rhea, Cyrus repeated, the sound awkward on his human tongue. Your name is Rhea? She nodded, the human gesture again, then pointed to the infant and made a different sound, like water dropping into a still pool. Kale. Kale, Cyrus said, smiling despite himself. It's beautiful. Then, to his surprise, Rhea pointed at him, eyebrows raised in obvious question. Oh, Cyrus, he said, pointing to himself. I'm Cyrus. SSS. Russ, she attempted, the sound hissing between her teeth. Her mouth formed shapes differently than a human's, making certain phonemes challenging. Close enough, Cyrus said, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. Names were a beginning, a recognition of personhood, of connection. Not mother and infant, not host-subject and hybrid specimen, but Rhea and Kale. Over the next days, their communication expanded. Rhea proved remarkably adaptable, quickly learning simple human words and phrases. Cyrus tried equally hard to grasp her language, though the clicks and whistles were often beyond his physiological capabilities. Kale grew with astonishing speed, already attempting to sit up and reach for objects by the end of the first week. His eyes followed everything, especially Cyrus, with an intelligence that seemed beyond his infancy. Most remarkable was his skin, which Cyrus observed could subtly change color in response to his emotions, paling when frightened, deepening to a rich azure when content, developing faint purple undertones when hungry. Cyrus repaired toys for Kale from scrap materials around the station. Simple geometric shapes, a mobile that hung above his sleeping area, a softball made from scraps of the thermal fabric salvaged from the pod. Rhea watched these offerings with initial suspicion that gradually transformed into cautious acceptance. The first true crisis came during an unusually severe dust storm. The ancient station groaned under the assault, and a critical failure in the air filtration system sent alarm klaxons blaring through the corridors. The caustic elements of Aurelia's atmosphere began seeping in, setting off Cyrus's portable toxin detectors. Rhea, startled by the alarms, gathered Kale to her protectively, eyes wide with fear. Cyrus tried to explain the danger through their limited share vocabulary, miming repair work and pointing to the air vents where faint wisps of amber-colored gas were visible. To his surprise, Rhea set Kale down in his sleeping area and approached the damaged filtration panel. She pointed to herself, then to the panel, then made a twisting motion with her hands. You want to help? Cyrus asked, uncertain. Rhea nodded firmly, then pointed to a tool on his workbench, precisely the one he would need for the repair. Together, they worked to restore the filtration system. Rhea's slender fingers proved adept at manipulating the small components that Cyrus's larger hand struggled with. She seemed to intuitively understand the system's function, making adjustments that Cyrus hadn't even considered. When the alarms finally silenced and the air cleared, they stood together in exhausted relief. Without thinking, Cyrus placed his hand on Rhea's shoulder in a gesture of gratitude. She tensed momentarily, then, remarkably, relaxed. Her hand came up to cover his, the touch light as a feather. That night, as Kale slept peacefully, Rhea initiated their deepest communication yet. She pointed to Cyrus, then to the station, forming a question with her expression. "Why am I here?" Cyrus asked, understanding her intent. Rhea nodded. Cyrus hesitated, then retrieved an old datapad. He pulled up an image of Nero 7, a beautiful green and blue world in the days before the disaster. Then he swiped to the next image. The same planet transformed into a toxic wasteland, atmosphere churning with acidic storms. "I did that," he said simply, pointing to himself, then the ruined planet. "I trusted when I shouldn't have. I followed orders without questioning. People died." He swiped to a final image. Eliza, smiling and vibrant, standing beside him at the colony inauguration. "My sister," he said, touching the image gently. "She died there. Because of me." Rhea stared at the images, her expression unreadable to Cyrus's human perceptions. Then, slowly, she reached for the datapad. She held it for a moment, studying Eliza's face before setting it down. With deliberate movements, she pointed to herself, then mimed being confined, her hands forming bars in front of her. She pointed to her abdomen, where Kale had grown, and made a gesture like something being extracted from her body. "You were a prisoner," Cyrus said, understanding dawning. "They used you to create children." Rhea nodded, her expression darkening. She pointed to Kale, then to her own eyes, then made a slashing motion across her throat. "They wanted to kill him? Because of his eyes?" Another nod, more emphatic. Rhea pointed to Kale again, then to her own black eyes, then to something invisible beside her, moving her hand to indicate height, taller than herself. "His father," Cyrus guessed. "Kale's eyes come from his father?" "From another species." Rhea confirmed this with a gesture, then drew her finger across her throat again, this time pointing to both herself and Kale. "They wanted you both dead, because Kale is mixed, a hybrid." The word from the data crystal echoed in his mind. Offspring carries anomaly. Terminate. Do not retrieve. Rhea's black eyes held his, and in them, Cyrus saw understanding that transcended their biological differences, the understanding of one who had been deemed expendable by powers that viewed life as a commodity. She had been property to biogenesis, just as the colonists of Nero 7 had been acceptable casualties to Omnicorp. In that moment, something shifted between them, a wall crumbling, a bridge forming. They were no longer rescuer and rescued, but survivors of the same callous system, finding common ground in their shared humanity, regardless of species. From that night forward, a new warmth entered their interactions. Rhea began to smile, a subtle expression that involved a softening around her eyes and a slight parting of her lips. She allowed Cyrus to sit beside her as she fed Kale, and gradually, she shared more of herself and her culture through their growing language of gestures, simple words, and drawings. Cyrus learned that Rhea's people were called the Selendi, from a world of vast oceans and floating cities. Biogenesis had encountered them during deep space exploration and recognized their advanced biotechnology. What had begun as trade negotiations had become exploitation as the corporation recognized the unique adaptive capabilities of Selendi physiology. Rhea had been one of many taken for research purposes, though she believed she was one of the few, if not the only one, to produce a viable hybrid child. In return, Cyrus shared more of his own story. His brilliant career, his gradual ethical compromises, the warnings he had ignored on Nero 7, his flight from accountability and humanity. He spoke of his guilt, his self-imposed exile, his belief that isolation was his punishment and protection from causing further harm. Rhea listened with the same intensity she brought to everything, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she reached out and placed her hand over his heart. A gesture he had come to understand meant connection, recognition of another's pain. As weeks turned to months, the station transformed from a place of exile to a home. The hydroponic garden expanded, with Rhea introducing modifications that improved yield and diversity. She had an intuitive understanding of botanical systems that complemented Cyrus's more technical approach. The living quarters became more comfortable as they repurposed materials from unused sections of the station. Cyrus built a proper crib for Kale, who was now crawling and beginning to stand, his growth rate astounding by human standards. Their shared language evolved. A pidgin of English, Selendi clicks and whistles, and newly created signs and gestures. They developed routines and rituals, sharing meals, working together on station maintenance, taking turns caring for Kale. The day Cyrus realized he was happy, truly happy, for the first time since before Nero 7, came unexpectedly. He had been repairing a section of the station's dome, allowing actual sunlight to filter into what had become a thriving garden space. Rhea worked below, transplanting seedlings with Kale nearby, entertaining himself with a collection of small, polished stones that Cyrus had found during an excursion. The dome panel sealed properly, and Cyrus sat back on his scaffolding, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked down at the scene below, the greenery, the warm light, Rhea's slender form moving with grace among the plants, Kale's skin shifting to a happy blue as he played, and felt a surge of contentment so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. This was what he had been missing during his years of isolation. Not just human connection, but purpose, meaning, a reason to build rather than merely exist. That evening, as Kale slept and they sat together in the garden beneath the newly repaired dome section, watching Aurelia's moons rise through the dust-hazed sky, Rhea surprised him by taking his hand in hers. Her touch, once so rare and cautious, had become more frequent, but this was different, deliberate, meaningful. She placed his palm against her cheek, her black eyes reflecting the moonlight. Then, carefully pronouncing each word in her accented English, she said, "You saved us. Now, we save you." Cyrus felt something within him break and heal simultaneously, the final walls of his self-imposed isolation crumbling away. He drew her gently to him, and she came willingly, her head resting against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. They sat like that for hours, communicating without words, two beings from different worlds finding solace in each other's presence. When Rhea finally looked up at him, her expression contained a question Cyrus had no difficulty understanding, despite all their linguistic barriers. His answer was to lower his lips to hers, hesitantly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, a first bridge across the final frontier between them. Her lips were cooler than a human's would be, and slightly more firm, but the sensation sent warmth spreading through Cyrus's chest. When they parted, Rhea's skin had taken on a luminous quality he'd never seen before, glowing softly in the dim light. She smiled, a full smile now, not the subtle expression of before, and Cyrus smiled back, wondering at the strange paths that had brought them both to this unlikely moment of connection. Their newfound happiness lasted 3 months before reality intruded. Cyrus was outside the station, conducting routine maintenance on the external sensors, when one of the monitors began flashing an alert. An automated probe was passing through Aurelia 9's upper atmosphere, conducting standard scans. Most probes ignored the abandoned station. Its power signature was minimal, and its official status was decommissioned. But this one adjusted its course, descending to a lower altitude over the station's location. Something had caught its attention. Cyrus felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The station's power usage had increased significantly with 3 occupants instead of 1. The expanded hydroponics required more energy, and the repairs to long-dormant systems had activated power signatures that might appear unusual to an automated scan. Worse, the probe bore the distinctive markings of biogenesis, the same double helix he had seen on Rhea's escape pod. He rushed back inside, finding Rhea in the garden with Kale, who was now toddling confidently among the plants, his skin a happy azure blue. The sight of them, peaceful and unaware, sent a pang through Cyrus's heart. "We may have a problem," he said, keeping his voice calm despite his racing pulse. Rhea's expression changed instantly, her posture tensing as she gathered Kale to her. She had learned to read Cyrus's moods with uncanny accuracy. Cyrus explained the situation as clearly as their shared language allowed. The probe hadn't directly scanned the station's interior, but its presence suggested biogenesis had detected something unusual, perhaps related to the pod's final transmission, or perhaps from their increased power usage. Either way, it represented a threat to their safety and freedom. That night, after Kale was asleep, they faced the most difficult decision of their time together. "We could try to leave," Cyrus suggested, laying out their options. "There's an old transport shuttle in the station's hangar. It hasn't been used in years, and I'm not sure it's space-worthy, but might get us to the outer colonies where we could disappear." Rhea shook her head firmly. She had learned enough about the shuttle from her previous examinations of the station schematics to know its limitations. "Too far," she said. "No, life support for Kale." Her English had improved dramatically, though she still spoke in simplified sentences. "And they look for ships. Easy to find. Then we stay and hide," Cyrus said. We reduce power usage, mask our signatures better. We've survived here this long. We can make it work. Ria was silent for a long moment, her large eyes focused on something distant. Finally, she looked at Cyrus directly. "You're home," she said. "I took it. Made it. Dangerous." "No," Cyrus said firmly, taking her hands in his. "You didn't take anything. You gave me everything. Before you and Kale, this wasn't a home. It was a prison I built for myself." He squeezed her hands gently. "We're family now. We faced this together." Ria's eyes glistened with moisture, a rare display of emotion for her species. "Family," she repeated, the word evidently holding as much significance for her as it did for him. The decision made, they set to work preparing the station for potential discovery. Cyrus reconfigured the power systems to run at minimal capacity, using his knowledge of corporate scanning protocols to mask their signatures. They created hidden storage areas for essential supplies and established emergency protocols should they need to evacuate quickly. Most importantly, they reinforced the station's outer defenses, not weapons, which they lacked, but environmental protections. If biogenesis sent retrieval teams, Aurelia 9's natural hazards would be their best allies. Cyrus programmed the station's weather monitoring systems to provide advance warning of dust storms, which could be used as cover if needed. In the midst of these preparations, their relationship deepened. The shared danger united them further, transforming tentative affection into something stronger and more resilient. They began sharing sleeping quarters, finding comfort in each other's presence during the uncertain nights. Their physical intimacy evolved naturally, each discovering the other's body with gentle curiosity, learning the similarities and differences between their species. Kale, now nearly a year old by Earth standards, but developmentally closer to a 3-year-old human child, thrived despite the underlying tension. His vocabulary expanded rapidly in both English and Salendi, and he displayed remarkable cognitive abilities, particularly in spatial reasoning and pattern recognition. The anomaly that had marked him for termination, his hybrid nature, seemed to confer advantages rather than disabilities. Most striking was his empathic sensitivity. Kale could sense the emotional states of both Cyrus and Ria with uncanny accuracy, his skin changing color in response not just to his own feelings, but to theirs as well. When Cyrus was anxious about the probe's appearance, Kale's skin developed faint gray striations. When Ria experienced momentary sadness remembering her homeworld, Kale's normally bright eyes dimmed to match her mood. 3 months passed without further incidents. The probe had completed its scan and moved on, and no retrieval teams had appeared. Cyrus began to hope that perhaps they had escaped notice, that the probe's interest had been coincidental rather than targeted. Then came the day that changed everything. Cyrus was monitoring the long-range scanner, a habit born of renewed vigilance, when he detected an anomalous signal. Unlike the probe, this wasn't a standard scan pattern. It was a directed beam, sweeping methodically across the terrain, emanating from a ship in synchronous orbit above Aurelia 9. The search pattern and signal configuration were unmistakable. Someone was actively looking for something or someone, and the ship's identifier, when Cyrus managed to decode it, confirmed his worst fears: biogenesis. "They've come for you," he told Ria that evening, his voice tight with controlled fear. "The scan patterns are too precise to be routine. They're looking for the pod, for you and Kale." Ria's expression remained calm, but her skin darkened around her throat and temples, a sign of distress Cyrus had learned to recognize. She clutched Kale closer, the child sensing the tension and remaining unusually quiet. "What we do?" she asked, her abbreviated syntax reflecting her anxiety. Cyrus ran his hands through his hair, mind racing through possibilities, each less promising than the last. "We have 3 options," he said finally. "We could try to run, use the old shuttle, and take our chances in space. We could try to hide, power down completely, use the natural radiation of the moon to mask your biosignatures. Or," he hesitated, "we can fight." Ria considered each option, her large eyes unblinking. "No running," she said finally. Shuttle too old. They faster. She glanced down at Kale, who was watching both of them intently, his skin shifting between normal blue and anxious gray. Hiding means cold. Dark. Kale needs warmth light. Then we stand our ground, Cyrus said, a cold resolution settling in his chest. We prepare. We use what we have. And we face whatever comes together. That night, as Kale slept between them, Rhea took Cyrus's face between her hands. In the dim light, her eyes seemed to hold the depth of space itself. If they come, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, you could say you found us. Prisoner, say you wait for them. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. You live. Safe. Cyrus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Never, he said, taking her hands in his. I made that choice once before, safety over what was right. I won't make it again. He pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture they had developed that bridged their different expressions of intimacy. We're family. Whatever happens, we face it as one. The ship maintained its orbit for 3 days, its scanning beams sweeping methodically across Aurelia 9's surface. Cyrus monitored its patterns, noting with growing alarm that the scans were concentrating increasingly on their sector. It was only a matter of time before a ground team would be dispatched. They used those days to prepare. Cyrus reconfigured the station's environmental systems, creating zones that could be selectively flooded with Aurelia's toxic atmosphere, if necessary. Deadly to humans, but tolerable for short periods to Rhea and Kale, whose respiratory systems were more adaptable. He established emergency routes, hidden storage caches, and remote monitoring systems throughout the station's sprawling, half-abandoned corridors. Rhea contributed her own preparations. Using materials salvaged from throughout the station, she created protective garments for herself and Kale that would better shield them from detection. More impressively, she synthesized compound from their garden's plants that, when mixed with specific minerals from Cyrus's geological samples, produced a substance that could temporarily mask Selendi biosignatures. Kale, sensing the gravity of the situation despite his young age, became unusually subdued. His normally curious exploration gave way to quiet watchfulness. He stayed close to either Cyrus or Rhea at all times, his skin rarely shifting from its protective gray-blue camouflage. On the 4th day, the scanner detected a small craft detaching from the orbiting ship and beginning descent toward Aurelia 9's surface. Its trajectory would bring it within 10 kilometers of the station, close enough for a ground expedition to reach them, even through Aurelia's harsh conditions. They're coming, Cyrus said, closing the scanner display. Landing in approximately 3 hours. Rhea nodded, gathering Kale into her arms. We ready, she said with quiet determination. They activated their prepared defenses, powering down non-essential systems and rerouting critical functions through isolated circuits that would be harder to detect. The garden lights were reduced to minimum levels, casting long shadows through the once bright space. The station fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Then they waited, a small family huddled together in the dim light of what had become their home, facing an uncertain future with only each other for strength. The ground team arrived during Aurelia's brief dusk. Cyrus's perimeter sensors detected their approach, 6 figures in advanced environmental suits, moving with military precision through the rocky terrain toward the station. They carried scanning equipment and weapons, their intent clear in their formation and movement. Remember the plan, Cyrus whispered, holding Rhea and Kale close one last time. Before they separated, whatever happens, protect Kale. Find your way to the emergency shuttle if things go wrong. I've programmed the coordinates for the outer colony on Parador. They don't ask questions there. Rhea's cool fingers traced his face in the darkness, memorizing its contours. We find each other, she said. Promise. I promise, Cyrus replied, his voice thick with emotion. Rhea and Kale retreated to their designated hiding place, a shielded compartment within the hydroponics bay with a dense plant growth and mineral-rich soil would help mask their biosignatures. Cyrus moved to the main entrance, preparing to implement their desperate plan. The biogenesis team breached the outer airlock with professional efficiency, overriding the outdated security protocols with ease. Cyrus watched through hidden cameras as they entered the station's main corridor, their helmet lights cutting through the dimness. Life signs detected. One of them reported, voice crackling through their communication system. Single human, plus anomalous readings consistent with target specimens. Proceed with caution. Remember, primary objective is recovery of the hybrid infant. Secondary objective is the female host. Use of lethal force authorized against any resistance. Cyrus felt cold rage build within him at their clinical callousness. Rhea was a female host. Kale was a hybrid infant. Property, not people. He accessed the station's intercom system, his voice echoing through the corridors. This is Cyrus Loren, former chief bioengineer for Omnicorp. I know what you're looking for, and I know why. You're trespassing on private property. Turn back now. The team paused, helmet lights swinging toward the nearest speaker. Loren, the leader responded, sounding surprised. You disappeared after Nero's 7. Command, are you receiving this? We have confirmation of Cyrus Loren's presence. After a pause, the leader addressed Cyrus again. Dr. Loren, we have no quarrel with you. We're retrieving corporate property, a valuable research specimen and its offspring that were lost during transit. Stand aside, and you won't be harmed. They're not property, Cyrus replied, his finger hovering over the environmental controls. They're people, with names, with rights, with dignity. Something biogenesis wouldn't understand. Don't be naive, Dr. Loren, the leader said, signaling his team to continue advancing. You worked for Omnicorp. You know how these operations function. The Selendi female was created in our labs, genetically modified for our purposes. The hybrid was an authorized experiment. They belong to biogenesis by every legal standard in the corporate sectors. Not here, Cyrus said, pressing the control. Not anymore. The corridor ahead of the team suddenly depressurized, Aurelia's toxic atmosphere flooding in through deliberately open vents. The team's suits protected them, but the sudden change in conditions disrupted their formation and damaged some of their more sensitive equipment. Cyrus used the confusion to move to his next position, activating a series of decoy signals throughout the station. The biogenesis team split up, following the false trails, exactly as he had hoped. What followed was a desperate game of cat and mouse through the station's winding corridors. Cyrus used his intimate knowledge of the facility to stay ahead of the searchers, leading them away from Rhea and Kale's hiding place, triggering preset traps and obstacles to slow their progress. But the biogenesis team was well-trained and well-equipped. They adapted quickly, compensating for the environmental hazards and steadily sweeping through the station. Their scanning equipment, though hampered by Cyrus's countermeasures, continued to pick up traces of Selendi biosignatures. The inevitable happened as Cyrus was attempting to redirect the team toward the eastern wing. A scanner spike alerted them to stronger readings from the hydroponics bay. 2 team members broke off from the main group, heading directly toward Rhea and Kale's position. Cyrus abandoned his diversion tactics, racing toward the garden. He arrived just as the biogenesis operatives were forcing their way through the reinforced door he had installed. Stop, he shouted, raising an antiquated pulse rifle he had salvaged from the station's security lockers, functional but lacking the power of the team's modern weapons. The operatives turned, weapons raised. Stand down, Dr. Loren, one of them ordered. Final warning. I can't do that, Cyrus said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. I made that mistake once before, following orders instead of my conscience. I won't do it again. What happened next unfolded in chaotic fragments. The operatives fired, their weapons set to incapacitate rather than kill. Biogenesis wanted him alive for questioning. Cyrus dived for cover, returning fire. The pulse rifle's charge was limited, each shot precious. He managed to disable one operative's weapon before taking a glancing hit to his shoulder, the impact sending him sprawling. As the second operative advanced, the hydroponics bay was suddenly flooded with brilliant light, not from the overhead systems, but from within the plants themselves. The modified crops that Rhea had helped cultivate were reacting to the disturbance, their bioluminescence triggered by the weapon's discharge. In that moment of confusion, Rhea emerged from hiding. She moved with a fluid grace Cyrus had never witnessed before, her body seeming to flow around the operative's attempts to target her. She struck with precision, targeting vulnerable joints in the environmental suit, not trying to injure the human inside, but to disable the suit's functions. Alarms blared as the suit's integrity was compromised. The operative retreated, sealing his helmet as Aurelia's atmosphere began seeping in. Rhea used the opportunity to reach Cyrus, helping him to his feet. "Kale," he gasped, clutching his injured shoulder. "Safe," she assured him. "But more coming. We go. Now." They fled deeper into the station, toward their final fallback position. Cyrus could hear the biogenesis team regrouping, their communication chatter indicating growing frustration and determination. The team leader was calling for reinforcements from the orbiting ship. Rhea led the way to a small chamber near the station's core, where Kale waited, hidden within a modified storage unit that masked his biosignature. The child's eyes lit up at the sight of them, his skin shifting from anxious gray to relieved blue before registering Cyrus's injury and darkening again with concern. "Just a scratch," Cyrus assured him, though the numbing pain suggested otherwise. "We need to move to the shuttle bay. It's our only chance now." Rhea nodded, but her expression showed doubt. "Shuttle old. May not work." "It's better than staying here to be captured," Cyrus said, checking the corridor. "We prepared as best we could. It's time to take the risk." Their journey to the shuttle bay was a desperate race against time. The biogenesis team had regained cohesion and was systematically sweeping the station, blocking routes, and closing in on their position. Twice they nearly walked into ambushes, saved only by Rhea's acute hearing and Kale's empathic sensitivity to approaching danger. The shuttle bay, when they finally reached it, was just as Cyrus remembered, dusty, dimly lit, housing a single outdated transport craft that hadn't flown in at least a decade. But he had been working on it secretly for months, scavenging parts from other systems, preparing it as a last resort. "It won't win any races," he said as they hurried aboard, "but it should get us to the outer colonies. The navigation system is pre-programmed. Life support is minimal but functional." Rhea set Kale down in the co-pilot's seat, securing him with improvised restraints. The child watched with wide, solemn eyes as Cyrus began the startup sequence, ancient systems groaning to life after years of dormancy. Warning lights flashed across the console. The shuttle was far from optimal condition. But the engines hummed, the life support stabilized, and the bay doors responded to Cyrus's command, slowly grinding open to reveal Aurelia 9's dusty, star-strewn night sky. "Launching in 30 seconds, Cyrus announced, hands flying across the controls. "Hold on." The bay doors had opened barely halfway when the biogenesis team burst in, weapons raised. Their leader stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal a face hardened by years of corporate enforcement. "Enough, Dr. Lauren," he called out. "You've got nowhere to go. That shuttle won't make it past the atmosphere. Surrender the specimens, and we could discuss terms." Cyrus locked eyes with the man, seeing in him a reflection of what he might have become had he stayed with Omnicorp after Nero 7. Someone who could refer to sentient beings as specimens, who could justify any action in the name of corporate interests. "There are no specimens here," Cyrus replied, his hand hovering over the launch control. "Just a family. My family." He slammed his hand down on the control. The shuttle lurched forward, engines screaming in protest at the sudden demand for power. The biogenesis team scattered, diving for cover as the craft barreled toward the partially open bay doors. "Too small," Rhea cried out, pointing at the gap. Indeed, the doors hadn't opened enough for the shuttle to pass cleanly. "Trust me," Cyrus said, his eyes fixed on the narrowing exit. He pulled hard on the controls, tilting the shuttle to its side. Metal scraped against metal as they squeezed through the gap, the shuttle's hull protesting the abuse with alarming creaks and groans. Then they were clear, soaring into Aurelia 9's thin atmosphere, the station falling away behind them. Cyrus pushed the engines to their limit, hoping to escape before the orbiting biogenesis ship could react. Alarms blared throughout the cabin as the shuttle fought against gravity and its own age. Paneling rattled loose, and somewhere behind them, a minor coolant leak hissed ominously. But the stars grew brighter as they climbed, the dust-hazed sky giving way to the velvet darkness of space. "They following," Rias said, watching the scanner display with concern. The biogenesis ship had altered its orbit, moving to intercept. "They won't catch us," Cyrus promised, though he wasn't certain he believed it. The shuttle's engines were already exceeding their recommended output. Any more strain might cause a catastrophic failure. Kale, perhaps sensing the gravity of their situation, reached out to touch the control panel. To Cyrus's astonishment, the warning lights dimmed, and the engine strain reading stabilized. The child's skin glowed with a deep, pulsing blue as he maintained contact with the shuttle systems. "What is he doing?" Cyrus asked, amazed. Rhea smiled, a mother's pride shining through her concern. "Helping," she said simply. "Kale's special." Why they feared him. The hybrid child had inherited not just physical traits from his mixed parentage, but abilities neither of his biological contributors fully understood. His connection to technology was intuitive, almost symbiotic. Under his touch, the ancient shuttle found new reserves of power and stability. They broke free of Aurelia 9's gravitational influence just as the biogenesis ship launched pursuit craft. Cyrus activated the rudimentary jump drive, another system he had painstakingly restored over months of secret work. It was designed for short interplanetary hops, not true interstellar travel, but it would have to be enough. "Coordinates locked," he announced, his injured shoulder throbbing in time with his racing heart. "Jumping 5, 4, 3. The biogenesis pursuit craft opened fire, energy bolts sizzling past their hull. 2, 1, jump. The stars elongated around them as the jump drive engaged, ripping open a temporary corridor through subspace. The shuttle shuddered violently, systems never designed for such stress pushed to their absolute limits. For one terrible moment, Cyrus thought they had miscalculated, that the drive would tear itself apart along with their fragile craft. Then the shuddering ceased, replaced by an eerie stillness as they entered the jump corridor. The pursuit craft, their weapons, Aurelia 9 itself, all left behind, at least temporarily. Cyrus slumped back in his seat, exhaustion and pain overwhelming him now that the immediate danger had passed. Rhea moved to his side, examining his injured shoulder with gentle fingers. "Bad," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Need treatment." "Later," Cyrus said, forcing himself to focus on the navigation console. "We need to make sure we're on course." The jump would last approximately 12 hours, an eternity for their overtaxed systems, but barely enough distance to evade determined pursuers. Their destination, the colony world of Parador, orbited a dying star at the edge of corporate space. It was a haven for those seeking to disappear, its population a mix of refugees, exiles, and those simply tired of living under corporate control. If they could reach it, they might find safety. If not, Cyrus pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the present moment. Rhea was beside him, applying a makeshift bandage to his wound. Kale had fallen asleep in the co-pilot's seat, his small body exhausted by whatever he had done to help the shuttle. They were together. They were alive. It was enough for now. Hours later, as the shuttle cruised through subspace, Rhea joined Cyrus at the viewport. Kale slept peacefully in a nest of emergency blankets they had fashioned in the small crew quarters. "What if they follow?" she asked, her voice soft in the shuttle's quiet hum. "To Parador?" "They might," Cyrus admitted. "But biogenesis has limited influence there. The local administration values its independence. And we'll be careful. New identities, low profile. We'll find a place." Rhea was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the swirling patterns of subspace beyond the viewport. "I never thought," she began, then hesitated, searching for the right words in their shared language. "Never thought I would be free. Have family. Future." Cyrus took her hand, their fingers intertwining, 3 slender digits clasped with 5 thicker ones, a physical representation of their unlikely union. "I never thought I'd have a second chance," he replied. "After Nero 7, I believed punishment and isolation were all I deserved. You and Kale gave me something to live for again, something to fight for." They stood together as the shuttle carried them toward an uncertain future. Behind them lay Aurelia 9, the abandoned station that had become a home, and the pursuing forces that saw them as property and problem. Ahead lay Parador with its promise of anonymity and new beginnings, but also its own dangers and challenges. Between them slept Kale, a child of two worlds, belonging fully to neither, yet embodying the best of both. His existence had been deemed an anomaly, a mistake to be terminated. Yet in him, Cyrus saw the future, a bridge between species, a new kind of understanding that transcended biology and birthplace. The journey would be difficult. Resources were limited, the shuttle's systems unreliable despite Kale's mysterious assistance. Biogenesis would not abandon their pursuit easily, especially once they recognized the child's unique abilities. Even if they reached Parador safely, life would be a constant vigilance, a careful balance between integration and anonymity. But they would face it together. Family was not defined by shared DNA or planetary origin, but by choice and commitment. In the cold expanse of space, aboard a damaged shuttle bound for the edge of known territory, they had all the family they needed. 6 months later, on the outskirts of Parador's largest settlement, a small dwelling stood apart from the others. Unlike the prefabricated structures that dominated the colony, this home had been built by hand, its design an unusual blend of human practicality and Salendi aesthetic sensibility. The exterior was weathered by Parador's harsh climate, but the interior was warm and bright. Most notable was the garden, a domed structure attached to the main building, filled with plants both native to Parador and transplanted from elsewhere. At its center stood a single Aurelian feather fern, salvaged from the station's hydroponics bay before their flight, its silver blue fronds a reminder of where their journey together had begun. Inside, Cyrus sat at a workbench, repairing a moisture condenser for a neighboring farmer. His shoulder had healed, though it still ached during Parador's rainy season. His hair was shorter now, his beard trimmed, part of the new identity they had established upon arrival. Dr. Cyrus Loren was gone, replaced by Sierra Mariner, mechanical specialist and unremarkable recent arrival to the colony. Rhea moved through the garden, her slender form weaving between the plants, checking soil conditions and adjusting the irrigation system. She wore loose clothing that concealed her alien physiology from casual observation, though their immediate neighbors knew the truth and kept their secret. On Parador, most residents had something to hide, and respect for privacy was an unwritten law. Kale, now physiologically equivalent to a human 6-year-old despite only 18 months of life, sat cross-legged beside a disassembled drone. His fingers moved with precision beyond his years as he examined its components, occasionally closing his eyes as though listening to the device itself. His skin, once a telltale sign of his hybrid nature, had developed the ability to maintain a consistent human-like tone when in public, shifting to its natural blue hues only in the safety of their home. They lived quietly, cautiously. Cyrus took repair jobs that wouldn't attract attention but provided enough income for their needs. Rhea's knowledge of botanical systems had proven valuable to the struggling colony, her innovations helping improve crop yields without revealing their true origins. Kale attended the colony's small school, his accelerated development explained away as the result of early education and natural aptitude. There had been signs of pursuit, unusual visitors asking questions in the settlement, unmarked craft scanning from orbit, but so far, their precautions had kept them safe. The colonists of Parador, many with their own reasons to avoid corporate attention, closed ranks around those they considered their own. As the twin suns of Parador began to set, casting long shadows through the garden dome, Cyrus set aside his work and joined Rhea among the plants. Kale looked up from his project, his expression brightening. "Fixed it," he announced, holding up the drone. Unlike most children, His speech had been perfect almost from the beginning, another anomaly that might have threatened his existence in corporate space, but was merely an amusing quirk on Parador. "Well done," Cyrus said, examining the child's work with genuine admiration. What was wrong with it? Power coupling was misaligned, Cale explained, his small fingers pointing to a nearly microscopic component. It was sad. Cyrus and Rhea exchanged a glance at this last comment. Cale's empathic abilities extended beyond living beings to technology in ways they were still trying to understand. He spoke of machines having emotions, moods, desires, and somehow his interventions did seem to improve their function beyond what mere mechanical repairs should achieve. "Well, I'm sure it's very happy now," Rhea said, her English now fluent, though still carrying the musical cadence of her native Salendi. She ruffled Cale's hair affectionately. "Go wash for dinner. We have fresh greens from the garden." As Cale darted off, Cyrus drew Rhea into his arms, breathing in the subtle, sweet scent that was uniquely hers. "Happy?" he asked, their private ritual. She smiled up at him, her black eyes reflecting the golden light of Parador's sunset. "Happy," she confirmed. "You, more than I ever thought possible," he said honestly. They stood together in the garden they had created, surrounded by life that thrived under their care, listening to the sounds of their son moving through their home. Beyond the settlement lay vast, unexplored territories. Beyond the planet lay countless stars, and somewhere among them, corporate forces that would still see them as property and problem. But here, in this moment, they were simply family. Three beings from different worlds who had found in each other something worth risking everything for: connection, purpose, and a love that transcended the boundaries of species and space. Outside, Parador's moons rose above the horizon, their light filtering through the garden dome and casting gentle shadows across the flourishing plants. Within their small dwelling, Cyrus, Rhea, and Cale gathered for their evening meal, their conversation a blend of three languages, their laughter a harmony that needed no translation. They had no guarantees for tomorrow. The search might find them eventually, but they had today and each other, and a home built from choice rather than circumstance. On the harsh frontier of a distant colony world, they had created something beautiful and unexpected, a garden of possibility growing in the most unlikely soil. And for now, that was enough.